Hello there, my name is Dr. Saleem Javed and we are understanding cinema. We have been talking about how the American film industry got the prominence during the time frame of First World War, how by the beginning of 1914 it was contributing as half of the film's world, and by the end of the First World War it was majorly distributing for the all films for all the nations throughout the world, and they were able to do it with a strong worldwide distribution infrastructure. Now, it is said that during as you can see on your screen, that from 1914 to 1918, the rest of the world, including Asia, Africa, saw only American films, if they saw any at all. Now, look at this information. This is something that you can, feel jealous about. You can feel happy about. You can be frustrated about it also. But look at the way they were marching ahead. That anybody, whosoever saw a film between 1914 to 1918 and afterwards also, obviously that is true, that anybody who saw cinema in Asia or Africa, if ever they saw the film, it were American films. And in like after the World War, up to the level of Second World War, all the countries were taking measures to reduce the effect of American film industry, American films in their country. We have witnessed that in 1990 in India, like when MTV and other English films started getting released in India. So, please take it the way that I am not talking about history, maybe I am talking about right now India's current situation, India's current situation, that the reality which was there in 1920s, that was the reality in that was a reality in 1990 in India. That how we were fascinated by MTV, how we were fascinated by American films, and how even after having a major release, Spider-Man became a success. So, throughout the 1920s, both Germany and Soviet Union emerged as a significant player in the global film industry. Now, please understand that once I finish this, film the art movement and a few more things, then we will be understanding how Germany, the German expressionism became a major art form in the world of cinema, how Soviet films, the montage theory, how it became one of the major cinema movements in the history. So, it is not that that the industries like Germany or Soviet Union or Italy or France, they were not fighting back, they were, but because they were involved in the First World War, so it took them some time, So, it is like look at the timeline that up till Second World War, American film industry is not disturbed, and from Lumiere brothers, from Edison, they were making big budget film, and obviously Second World War disrupted, changed. That's the only reason that in 1950s and 1950s television became popular. 1960s psycho films. Look at the influence of German expressionism on films like Psycho and other films. 70s witnessed something else. 80s saw the downfall, and newer technology started getting into cinema. But meanwhile, in 1920s, obviously it started earlier also, but I would say that in 1920s, two major movements apart from American film industry is German expressionism and Soviet cinema, which we will be studying separately at length during coming lectures. And then Second World War, you have Italian neorealism, which was a direct effect of Second World War. So, Italian film also became extremely popular, and then how it faded away. Then you have French cinema, where you talk about Truffaut, where you talk about Godard, where you talk about Alain René, there is where French cinema. Then we have in India, we have in up till 70s, we were making very different sort of films. Then in 70s, you have the image of angry young man. In 80s, that angry young man was employed and rebellious. In 1990s, you have liberalization, and then suddenly your hero started going to Switzerland. 2010, your hero was absolutely a rich guy, carefree, nothing to do. But in 2010 onwards, the trend changed, and suddenly stories from small towns, Bareilly ki Barfi sort of a thing. Now these are the trends, and unless you do not gauge your film history like this, it 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 really becomes difficult to gauge what cinema is offering us. Sometimes people talk about that cinema is the reflection of society, or society is the reflection of cinema. Cinema came late, please understand this. So it has to be the reflection of society. It has borrowed from society. So when, like, a wise man said that if I want to know about a nation's audience or people or citizens, show me the advertisement of that country, show me the films of that country, and I will understand what sort of audience, what sort of people live in that particular country. What is their aspiration, how do they think, what are their issues. So this is what it is. So it is not that we are only talking about the history of American film industry. No, we will talk about German film industry. I mean, I'll be talking about, first I'll be talking about Italian film industry, and I have talked about those films, Quo Vadis and many more films, and then I'll be talking about cinema the art also, cinema D apostrophe ART. So when I pronounce French words, so I'll be talking about the English name also. So when I say cinema the art, so it's cinema D apostrophe ART. Okay, so in English you call liasoning, LIASION, but in French it's called liaison. So it's called liaison, whereas in English it's liasoning officer, whereas in French it's liaison officer. So it's the way it is pronounced. Now, so understand that it is not only about American film industry, it's about German also, it's about Soviet also, it's about Italian also, it's about Indian cinema also, and when I'll be talking about Indian cinema, I'll be talking about Assamese cinema. Now we have been taught that it's Assamese cinema. No, it's not Assamese cinema, it's Assamese cinema. That's the right pronunciation. It's not Assam, it's Assam. So we will be talking about that. We will be talking about Punjabi cinema, Bhojpuri cinema. We will be talking about Indian Hindi cinema. We will be talking about Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada. There is a long way to go. There is a long way to go. We will be talking about, and understanding it is important, because then you understand the nuances of a country. That is the foremost thing when you start understanding cinema, when you start, a course like film appreciation. That is where you understand people. How do they think, how do they react, what are their aspirations, what makes them sad, what makes them happy, what makes them crave for, So that's the only reason that, like suppose if I give you a very beautiful anecdote here. As you can see on your screen, it says that despite this, the film industry in America had become the unquestioned leader in both the economy and the art as a result of the First World War, a position that it would continue to hold until the introduction of sound, and in some respect even after that point also. Look at your screen again. It says the industry in France and Italy had progressed to the point where they were both artistic and commercial leaders of the global film industry in the first decade of the century. The industry in the United States then overtook them. Now, very interesting thing here, in 1914, when the war broke out in Europe, the Germany and Scandinavian cinema industry were in their infancy, and the British cinema, while having established an early advantage through the effort of the Brighton School. If you remember, we have talked about Brighton School at length and the influence of Brighton School on George Méliès had failed to undergo any industrial development at all. Following World War I, Paris emerged the central hub of an international artistic movement encompassing Cubism, Surrealism, Dadaism and Futurism. Now, this is something which I would suggest whether it is part of your syllabus or not. If you are a history, if you are a student of humanities, humanities is a very broad term, very broad term. Please understand, it includes English also, it includes political science also, it includes what not, if you really see the umbrella of humanities. I would suggest that you should really understand you should really study many movements which came in the beginning of 20th century, and 21st century also, obviously, and that is like the immediate. Then look at these words called Cubism. Look at your screen on these words like Cubism, Surrealism, Dadaism and Futurism. Now, remember these words and look at these images on your screen. Cubism, Dadaism. Now, this is something that you see daily. Please understand it. In advertisement, in MTV, a lot of, like in 1990, MTV was all about Dadaism and obviously how they were, presenting colors. Cubism was a new art form. Picasso, Cubism was absolutely a new art form. Look at Futurism. Look at Surrealism. Salvador Dali. If you have not read about Salvador Dali, look at his images and especially look at some of his famous portraits. Water is flowing in the air, he is in the air, chairs are in the air. So, surrealism, look at how time is melting. If you can really observe how time is melting. I mean, something like this was not earlier imagined in this particular form. Futurism, it is directly responsible for science fiction films like M, that I will be talking about during German Expressionism. It came after Futurism only, and when you see the sets of Metropolis, M is a different film noir film, film noir genre. There is a film noir genre. I will be talking about M later on. But look at the Metropolis, okay, Frislang. When you see the set of first science fiction film in the world, it directly reminds you of Futurism, as you can see on your screen. It is like you wonder as if it has taken direct inspiration from there. Look at Cubism, Dadaism, look at Futurism, look at Surrealism. Very few people talk about these things, but they really had a direct influence. When I will be talking about German Expressionism, I mean Cubism is there, Dadaism is there. Dadaism is not directly, but yes, the influence of it is there. Futurism is in a very different form. So, Surrealism, absolutely it is there. Now, the intellectual of that time were fascinated. This is a really beautiful slide. The intellectuals like Picasso, Salvador Dali that I was just talking about, and a lot of other artists, the intellectuals of that time were fascinated by cinema's ability to encapsulate dreamlike situation and its capacity to imagine and manifest modernist idea of time and space. An influential individual in this movement was Louis Deluc, a writer and editor who established the magazine of cinema, and preceding Einstein pioneered the exploration of film's authentic aesthetic theory. Now, Deluc, Louis Deluc. Now, look at this on screen. It says Louis. Now, in English, we study it as Louis. And D-E-L-L-U-C, de-luc. But in French, Louis is Louis. So, S is gone. So, Louis the Luc. Okay. So, Louis the Luc created innovative storylines and established a collective of aspiring filmmakers called the French Impressionist School, or the first avant-garde. Now, this is not avant-garde, it is avant-garde. This group included Jeremy Dulac, Jean Epstein. Now, this is Jane Epstein, it is Jean Epstein, Marshall Labière. It is not Marshall L. Habier, it is Marshall Labière and Abel Gance. Now, look at the influence of the Luc on the form of storytelling, and look who are the people who are influenced by this the Luc. So, Jean Epstein, Marc Labière, Abel Gance. Now, during the mid 1910, the German now this is really important. Now, I am taking you back and telling you a bit, not much, about the initial development, and then I will be talking about film the art movement. Now, here is where in this slide that you can see on your screen, I am talking about French, okay, how Dulac he started cinema magazine and the influence it had, and then the people those who were influenced by it. Now, I am talking about German, German cinema, that during the mid 1910, obviously the world war is going on, the German government recognized that to be on equal footing with countries such as France, Italy, England and the United States, its film industry need to improve. Now, this is really important. I mean, this is German government is recognizing. Tsar is gone. The pronunciation is Tsar. When I will be talking about German expressionism, then I will tell you that this is the spelling of Tsar and you will be laughing your heart out. Sir, this cannot be the spelling of Tsar. The pronunciation is Tsar, but it starts with C, So, it's fantastic, when I talk about German film industry, when I talk about French film industry, half of my students say that, Saleem sir, how have you remembered these names in French and in German? And I tell them honestly that I memorize these names. I mean, there is no other way. I know a bit of French, but it does not mean that I know each and every pronunciation, I know each and every word in how it is spoken. So, I practiced, Jean-Louis Godard, so it's Jean-Louis, so that is a standard pronunciation, and even when I talk to French people, they understand this. So, there has to be this now very interesting, very interesting understanding here. Now, I want you to see on screen and look at the last line. I will read the line quite late, but tell me what is the word that I have highlighted before UFA. Can you read the word? Now, let me read it and then I will be telling you a very interesting story about this. The German military supreme commander took control of the major film studios. So, the story goes like this, that any film studio that was in Germany, they were consolidated, okay, into one entity, and that the name of that one entity was UFA. But the interesting part, I mean, it was formed in 1917, but the interesting part that the UFA was Universum Film Actium Gesellschaft. Now, that is the name of UFA, that is the full form of UFA, Universum Film Actium Gesellschaft. Now, when I read it for the first time, it was very difficult for me to memorize, Universum Film Actium Gesellschaft, and I really have to cross check it, through German pronunciation, the app, that whether I am saying it right or not. So, it is Universum Film Actium Gesellschaft, or UFA as it is popularly known, and it was formed by 1917. You know, this, when I'll be talking about German Expressionism, this University film Gesellschaft will be playing a major role for the first time. Imagine that you club Paramount, Sony, MGM, all the major production companies of your country, and you make them one entity. That was exactly the case when we talk about Universum Film Gesellschaft or UFA. That was the length of their seriousness when it comes to cinema, and obviously had this not been there, then the German Expressionism would not have taken its shape. Good, bad, ugly, whatever you call it, but German Expressionism became a prominent cinema movement in the world. And we'll be talking about the nitty-gritties and this, the qualities, or the good or bad or the ugly about that movement when we will be talking about German Expressionism. It was not merely a merger, it was establishment of a cinematic collegium or a behemoth that would influence the German film industry for a long time. Now, it is the story of Universum Film Gesellschaft or UFA. What makes, you know, German Expressionism important is the unsettling vibe of this of the projection, or the way it was shot, or the way sets were made, the way makeup was done, the way lighting was done. Chiaroscuro lighting was part of the system, and the element of isolation, discomfort, sexual tension, and whatever, you know, imagine a country which has lost a war. You know, you cannot make happy-go-lucky sort of a cinema. So, the inner turmoil of people was projected on screen, where they were isolated, where there was discomfort. So, when I as a student cinema saw German Expressionism for the first time, I was like, what's going on, sort of a feeling, that the initial feeling was that what's going on. But when you understand, when you know the social political aspiration condition of that country, then you realize, no, that this was the best projection of the inner world in the outer form. Inner world, the inner turmoil in the outer form, which is cinema. So, then you realize that the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, why it is such a big film. Then you realize why Metropolis has come from Germany. Then you realize the student of the Prague, you know, you realize a lot of other Dracula, first Dracula film, then you realize, and the condition it was made, and they all became classic jagged lines, uneven lines. Like suppose if this light has got an effect on me, now imagine this effect is being painted on me. Can you imagine that? That the light which is falling on me from right side of my hand, now imagine that this effect is painted on me. Right now light is falling on me. Now imagine that the effect of light is painted on me. Symbolism was there, very distorted reality was there, and on the other hand, French cinema historically had strong roots. It was one of the main centers which stood during the time of crisis. Now, I have given you a glimpse of how Hollywood became a major artistic in terms of art, in terms of economics, in terms of scale, in terms of dominance, in terms of prominence. You know, then I gave you a small background of that. Even French films were not left behind. I talked about they started a film magazine long before it got prominence in Russian cinema, and then we talked about a bit about Russian cinema also. Then we talked about a bit. Then we talked a bit about German cinema also, and all these three industries, be that French, Italy, or Germany or Russian, they were they became major movements. They became major movements out of the scarcity. Out of the scarcity, when I'll be talking about Kuleshov's experiment, when I'll be talking about Einstein uh, montage, then you will understand that how it started, how it changed the very grammar of cinema. When they did not have films when they did not have film strip to shoot with, they were already experimenting with the strip which was already shot. Now look at the possibility. The resources were limited, supplies were not there, war was going on. You are working in an art form which is not the point of interest for anybody at that point of time. Your work is unknown at that point of time, but still you are fighting, still you are struggling, still you are putting up things. And then you realize that one day when the war is over, when your work becomes when your work is accessible, when it is hailed high, then you realize that the time invested, it did not go waste. Now the thing that I really want to talk uh, about a very interesting thing, but I think that will require a lot of time also. So I give you a hint and then leave you, and then in coming lectures I'll be talking about. I would like to talk about the empire of Pathé Frères. Now I have talked about George Millier, and if you remember, that was one of my most emotional videos, because for me George Millier, I really value him high, and his competitor was Pathé. And I really want to talk about this French person, Pathé, at length in my next video. And thank you very much for watching this.